It was a warm May evening when Julia Lee returned home from work and parked her Honda Civic in front of her house at 15 Maple Grove Way. She'd barely stepped inside to grab a jacket when she noticed the orange sticker plastered on her windshield. In bold letters it proclaimed, "Vehicle towed parking in violation of HOA regulations." Her heart sank. Julia stared at the empty driveway and the curb beyond it, feeling a surge of panic and anger. How could her car be towed from her own street, in front of her own home? Without hesitation, she called Fast Towing Services. A curt voice informed her she owed $300 in tow fees, plus $50 per day in storage. Julia, resolute, said she'd pay, but just barely held back tears at the injustice of it. Later, at the impound lot, her Civic sat forlorn behind a chain-link fence. She handed over her ID and credit card, glancing at the towing authorization form. It cited Oakwood Estates HOA's CC&R Article 7.4. No vehicles may be parked on private streets overnight. Underneath, HOA President Ellen Grayson's signature glared back at her. By 9 p.m., Julia drove home in borrowed Uber fare, determined to reclaim her right. That night, Julia brewed coffee and booted up her laptop. She accessed the county's public records and discovered that Maple Grove Way, and its sidewalks and streetlights, had never been public property. The original plat map, recorded 10 years ago, deeded the roads to Oakwood HOA, Inc., marked as common area. She printed the HOA's CC&Rs and found Article 3.1. Common area shall include all roads, parking areas, sidewalks, curbs, and landscaped areas. A footnote caught her eye. Article 12.3, Disposal of Common Area, stated, "The association may, by resolution of 2/3 of its homeowners, sell any portion of common area at fair market value, subject to right of first refusal by the member requesting the sale." A spark lit in Julia's mind. If the HOA owned the street, and any member could buy it at market value, perhaps she could stop the towing by purchasing Maple Grove Way herself. She drafted an email to her real estate attorney friend, Mara. "Is this right? Can I legitimately request to buy a street from my HOA?" Mara confirmed. The state's HOA laws and the CC&R clause gave Julia a clear right to petition. Armed with newfound knowledge, Julia walked to the HOA mailbox and dropped off a letter addressed to the HOA board. She requested the association honor her right of first refusal, appraise Maple Grove Way and offer it to her at fair market value. The letter cited Article 12.3 and included an informal offer of $125,000, based on comparable appraisals for private streets in her county. A week later, she received an email from Blake, the HOA property manager. "Your request will be discussed at the next board meeting on June 15th. Meanwhile, daily storage fees for her Civic continued, swelling her costs. Julia refused to remove them. Let the HOA know they couldn't intimidate her with repeated fees. Julia knew a successful petition required the approval of 2/3 of homeowners, 40 out of 60. She designed a simple petition form and printed it with her email, name, and the sale clause text. That weekend, she went door to door on Maple Grove Way, Maple Ridge Court, and Oakwood Lane, explaining the situation to neighbors. Many admitted they'd been fined or warned for parking outside their driveways, and none realized the street belonged to the HOA. Neighbors signed in droves. Mr. Tran, who parked his minivan outside his home every night, said, "If Julia wins this, I can finally park without panicking." Mrs. Jansen, a retiree, added, "It's our street. We should have a say." Within 5 days, Julia collected 48 signatures, more than enough. She posted scanned copies to the HOA board and on the private Oakwood Facebook group, along with FAQs about maintenance, curbside parking rules, and how the purchase would leave existing landscaping contracts intact. On June 15th, Julia walked into the Oakwood clubhouse filled with 40 families. The HOA board of 5 sat at the head table, flanked by their attorney, Ms. Patel. President Ellen Grayson called the meeting to order, balancing her notes. First item. Review of towing policy. Second item. Ms. Julia Lee's request under Article 12.3. Julia stood at a podium, heart-pounding. She presented the street deed, the CC&R clause, her petition with 48 signatures, and her purchase offer. Neighbors nodded approvingly. Some applauded quietly when she finished. Ms. Patel rose, objecting on procedural grounds. The board had to evaluate if the sale served community interests and if Julia had the capacity to maintain the street. President Grayson asked for a private caucus. 10 tense minutes later, they returned. "Ms. Lee," Grayson announced, "the board recognizes your right. We will proceed with the sale. We'll schedule appraisal and closing." The room erupted in applause. Julia exhaled, tears of relief pricking at her eyes as neighbors cheered. 2 weeks later, Julia and the HOA treasurer signed the deed transferring Maple Grove Way to her. She paid $125,000 into the HOA's reserve fund. That evening, she hosted a street closing celebration under string lights. Neighbors sampled her famous fish tacos and sipped iced tea on folding chairs set along the asphalt. She explained her plan. Existing contracts with Greenscape Landscaping and Bright Light Utilities would continue. Quote, "No disruption in service." She unveiled the new parking amendment. Homeowners and their guests could park curbside adjacent to their property between 6 p.m. and 8 a.m. without penalty. The HOA board members looked on, forced smiles in tow. Over the following months, Maple Grove Way blossomed. Children roller skated at dusk, couples strolled without fear of towing, and block parties returned, often organized by Julia herself. She set up taco nights, book swaps on the sidewalk, and even a miniature farmer's market on Saturdays. Neighbors praised her leadership. Mr. Patel from next door said, "Without Julia's courage, we'd still be towing and fining over every street parking." Ms. Jansen waved as she passed Julia on her morning walk. "Thank you for giving us back our freedom." Julia's journey taught her, and her community, several vital lessons. Read the covenants. Hidden within dense legal language lie homeowner rights. Use ADR. State HOA statutes mandate dispute resolution processes. Build coalitions. Strength lies in numbers, 2/3 vote meant victory. Leverage ownership. Buying the street turned a punitive policy into collaborative governance. Maintain unity. Keeping maintenance contracts intact ensured smooth transition. She also discovered personal resilience. Facing towing, legal battles, and skeptical neighbors tested her resolve. But she emerged as a community leader, no longer just Julia Lee, homeowner, but Julia Lee, attendee liaison, event planner, mediator, and street owner. Word of Maple Grove Way's transformation spread beyond Oakwood Estates. Neighboring HOAs invited Julia to present at town halls, sharing her model of homeowner empowerment. Local news stations aired segments, "How One Woman Reclaimed Her Street." Real estate blogs praised Oakwood's progressive parking amendment, predicting property values would stay strong with balanced rules. Back in her backyard, where she once felt powerless, Julia now hosted a weekly, community hour. With tacos, lemonade, and lawn chairs, she and her neighbors discussed gardening tips, watched kids play, or debated book club selections. The street was not just asphalt beneath their cars. It was the artery of social connection. One crisp autumn morning, Julia walked Maple Grove Way, coffee in hand, smiling at parked BMWs, SUVs, and the occasional guest car neatly spaced. She thought of the towing notice that started it all. If she'd acquiesced, she would have continued paying fines in silence. Instead, she read the fine print, rallied her neighbors, and used the law to transform adversity into opportunity. "I bought the street," she reflected, "not for me alone, but for every resident who lives here, and for the simple right to park and walk freely." Maple Grove Way remains privately owned by Julia Lee, yet shared by all, embodying community spirit grounded in legal savvy and neighborly unity. So the next time your HOA flexes its muscle, remember, sometimes the surest response is to buy the muscle, and turn it around to serve everyone.